Kind of, I went into the woods and I was coming out onto a trail because I heard something in the woods and I thought it was him. As I got closer, I just assumed it was him. What else would be walking upright and moving but the two of us? So I just started shooting at it with paintballs. I got closer to it and I realized it was not him at all. Whatever it was, which I believe was a Sasquatch, but it stood up. It towered over me. I'd never seen anything like that before. And frankly, it scared the hell out of me, so I took off running.
All right. Brian, thanks for being on the show with us tonight, man.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. We know we were talking earlier a while back, and you had a Bigfoot encounter when you were younger. How old were you, and where did this happen at?
Would have been, say, 15 or 16. Probably closer to 16. It was in Albion, Pennsylvania, just over the Ohio line.
Okay, gotcha. So, what was going on that day, and what were you guys doing? What happened to you?
So when we were growing up, my parents had a place out there that we used to camp. They have 12 acres right over the Ohio line. And my best friend and I were playing paintball somewhere between 10 and midnight because it seemed like a good idea at the time. So we had, like duct tape laser pointers to these cheap paintball guns, and we're taking shots at each other. And we have a trail system that we had cut in, and I was coming. I went into the woods and I was coming out onto a trail because I heard something in the woods and I thought it was him. And of course, I had this big grin on my face because it looked like he had his back to me, and I thought I was going to get the jump on him and sneak up real close and just unload. Little did I know he had the same idea, but he was on a different trail and thought he saw me. As I got closer, I still couldn't see it. It was pitch black. There's no, it was very rural even still today. There's no light or anything out there. It was kind of a cloudy night. So I just assumed it was him. What else would be walking upright and moving but the two of us? So I just started shooting at it with paintballs. It didn't seem like it reacted. That's really strange. So I really took off. Like maybe I'm hitting a tree because it's pitch black and I can't see. Well, I got closer to it and I realized it was not him at all. Whatever it was, which I believe was a Sasquatch, but it stood up. Mind you, I am 6'8". I was back then already. It towered over me. I easily 2 or 3 feet. And I'd never seen anything like that before. And frankly, it scared the hell out of me, so I took off running. My friend on another trail was kind of on, if you would, the main trail, thought the same thing. So he was shooting at it from the other direction, thinking it was me. And then it stood up and he saw the same thing, except he saw the other side of it. And he came running down a trail, and it was almost kind of where they connect at a point. We almost crashed into each other. And then that really got things shaken up because we both looked over, to the right, and there was this thing standing there that was walking towards us, and it was humongous. Back then, he was 6'4", 300 and change, and it was wider and taller than both of us. The thing was massive. And frankly, we took off running. We went back to where the trailer was that we stayed in when we were out there because we thought we didn't really know what to think. We spent the next several hours trying to figure out what we saw. And I'd been to Bigfoot since I was a kid, as far back as I can remember. And I think we just saw a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. And we were going back and forth. I was like, "Are you sure there's something else out there?" And she, "Yeah, I'm sure." And we just kept talking about it. And it walked upright. It towered over me when it stood up in the woods. And very rarely in life do I encounter someone taller. It's an unusual circumstance. And for that thing to be, I've never seen anything that big before in my life. So I've met people that are 7 feet tall before, and it was beyond In my opinion, it was 9, 10 feet tall easily, and it was huge. It was wide. It was quick. It didn't make any noises. It didn't act aggressive. I think it was just confused. Frankly, we were confused as well, especially at 16. You see this massive thing and it's walking towards you. Our first instinct was to run, you know. Now I would, of course, act differently. I'd probably stop and try to take a picture of it somehow. But there were no cell phones in the mid 90s. So, you know, there was nothing. You know, the next day when we went out to the woods to look kind of at the area to see what was going on, and we retraced his steps, my steps, we didn't see anything at the time that would have raised a red flag, although I would have looked for different things now than I would have back then. We were just trying to see if it was still around, if we could see it in the daylight, if we could see it further away. And we never saw it before or since. It was and it's been, geez, almost 25 years now, and I can still see it in my mind like it was yesterday. And we're still best friends. We still talk almost every day. We talk about it all the time because it's just, you know, if you don't, once you experience it, it'll really make you a believer out of you when you see something like that. I was always a little bit skeptical just because I was, well, why isn't there any bodies? How come we don't ever find this? How come this, that, and the other? But then once you see this massive thing out there, there's just erases that kind of doubt. Even though I can't 100% confirm what it was, I guarantee you, if you saw that thing, you'd think the same thing. And then it's just been, you know, researching and searching ever since, looking at different things, watching documentaries, things like that, and
sounds like you're lucky it didn't follow you.
It very well could have, because it got. I mean, it was keeping up, and it didn't seem like it was running when we were. I mean, we were running, but when we stopped and turned around, it appeared to just be walking, and it was walking incredibly fast. And it stopped, and we were just kind of frozen for a second, and then we took off running. And we ran inside. We're looking out the windows, and then nothing followed us. And we just kind of sat there for literally hours and we went back and forth trying to figure out what was out there and what could walk. Because it walked pretty far upright. Because my first thought was, well, maybe it was a bear. You know, they stand up, they're massive. But it didn't look like a bear. It looked like it had broad shoulders. It looked like it had an almost humanoid form to me.
Bears are taller than 6'8".
Yeah. So, but the thing was, as my friend PJ's always said, it walked upright. It was bipedal. And we saw it, you know, it came at us walking. A bear might take a few steps and then fall and get on all fours and charge us. And it was mad. It would have came after us. This thing got close enough to take a look at us. And luckily for us, decided we were not a threat. And it went on its way. It allowed us to run like hell, but it could have easily caught up to us if it wanted to, and then we wouldn't have stood a chance. Something that big would have to have that amount of size and weight would have to be incredibly strong, I would assume. But yeah, so that was an interesting night.
So do you think you guys hit this thing with the paintball guns?
I'm almost 100% sure I hit it.
Okay. How far away do you think you were from this creature?
10 feet.
Oh, 10 feet away? That's
maybe
not
12.
very far.
No, that's what I'm saying. I could tell it had a humanoid figure. It was kneeling down, I think, when I was shooting at it or bending over. I have no idea what it was doing.
And it did nothing. It didn't make a noise. You didn't smell anything, and it did nothing at all to you?
I didn't smell anything. I had heard a noise. That's why I initially went over there. Because I had heard something moving in the woods, and from a distance, I just assumed it was him. You know, I heard it. I saw what it, you know, it looked like it had a humanoid figure. I was like, oh, there he is. I didn't see his face. Like, that's great. He must be looking the other way. I wonder what he's doing, you know? Yeah, I didn't realize it was bending over. I just thought he was standing there. And I figured, oh, he probably thinks I'm going to come up that trail, and he's probably trying to set me up, you know, because I didn't see his laser pointer on off the paintball gun. So I was like, oh, that's a great idea. He probably turned it off thinking he'll see mine coming and then shoot me. So I was trying to drop in behind him, and I don't know what it was doing, and it may have been seen, it may have watched, it may have caught PJ, it may have caught his attention, and not me. It may not have realized we were both out there. It was facing his direction. I was coming up behind it, and then I started shooting it. When it didn't react, I kept going in, and then I stopped once I realized that was way too big to be him. And then when it stood up, it towered over me. I took off. I was out of there.
Wow, that's crazy.
Shit, he probably didn't even feel paintballs hit him.
I mean, they weren't, they're not like ready. They weren't like the cheap Walmart paintball guns. So I mean, they weren't packing. I mean, we were wearing T-shirts, so it wasn't, doing a lot of damage. I'm surprised it didn't irritate it, if nothing else. And maybe it was just shocked as we were. It probably didn't know what the paintballs were either. It's probably, maybe it thought something was biting at them. Especially with both of us shooting at them, it may have just been a sensory overload for it, and like, what's going on? And it may have been as shocked as we were what was happening. But
when you went back out the next day, did you see any marks on the tree that might have hit the tree too?
I don't know that we saw. I mean, there were paintball marks on the trees just because we've been up there all weekend shooting at each other. So I mean, there was paintball marks everywhere. We were looking for any kind of footprints or just any kind of sign it had been there. And it was dry, so it was summer, you know what I mean? So it hadn't rained, at least in the days that we were there, so the ground wasn't muddy. It's very, very wooded up there. My parents have the 12 acres, but the farms surrounding it, some of them are several hundred acres. And a lot of that's wood, so who knows where it came from or where it went. And that area is still rural today. There's really, my parents retired up there, so I go up there, and I still walk that same trail, and I always try to retrace my steps. It still fascinates me. But there's still, even today, there's hundreds of acres up there that just sits there.
Yeah, I'm looking on the map here where Albion is, and we have heard a ton of encounters going on in eastern Ohio, western Pennsylvania, and the line there. And you guys aren't very far from Conneaut or Erie, which is actually a heavy wooded and a lot of river systems going on through there. So I believe that there's a lot of activity going on there.
I believe so as well. Over the years, I've gone to different libraries and speakers and stuff like that, and I've talked to people. And in the 90s, around that time, there was a lot of activity. On the Ohio side, it's Ashtabula County, where Conneaut is. And only in the last 5, maybe 10 years has that area actually started to be developed. They've just now started putting developments in, but for the most part, there were no suburbs of Ashtabula. There was nothing out there. It was completely rural. You had Conneaut, and that was pretty much it. That was the only city. Everything else was completely wooded. On the Pennsylvania side, it still remains untouched. There's no development whatsoever. But I've met other people that have, in that area, there was Ashtabula, have seen a lot of stuff, and the same thing on the Pennsylvania side. When you go to different conferences just locally in the area, people say, oh yeah, I was in Erie at this time, or I was around Conneaut or Ashtabula at this time. And it's like, it seems like at least at one point they were around, and they may still be. I don't know I've always wondered over the years what their migrationary patterns are, if they migrate at all, or how do they, it's one of the things we were trying to figure out is where did it come from? Because there's no caves or anything as far as we know up there. It has to live somewhere, I would assume, to be that massive.
Well, actually, looking at you making that comment, there's nothing there. You're right. I mean, if you look at the borderline between northern Ohio and Pennsylvania, on each side of the line, there's a lot of area where there's a lot of water and streams and rivers, a lot of river systems, and just nothing. There's no towns or anything. I'm zooming in on a town here, and I don't see the name of it. It's just like some crossroads. There's nothingness there. There's really no towns until you get south into Albion or south of Albion, Or, once you get out of Conneaut and south of Conneaut, there's nothing in Ohio there either. So why wouldn't they be there? There's no humans
Yeah,
there.
yeah, and maybe
Yeah.
on those big giant farms, like you were saying, maybe there's old barns and stuff out there that they don't use anymore. Or they're just out there. They could use
That's
those.
Oh yeah, that's very possible. And yeah, there's still. I mean, even Albion itself, I think, has one, maybe two stoplights, and there's nothing out there. Everyone works at the prison, and that's pretty much it. Or they commute to Erie or Cleveland, you know. So, and yeah, there's a lot of streams. There's a big river that goes right through there. We used to take dirt bikes down a dirt road there. There used to be a bridge, but it burnt down, so the road is completely. There's nothing down the road. It just goes to nowhere at this point. Well, we years ago, over the years, we've gone through the woods and kind of ventured over to some other properties, if you will. Just kind of curious, looking for any signs. Like now, I would go look for hair, footprints. I'd have something to make a mold. I usually have something to record with. I haven't really found any signs of it per se, but I'm still not convinced they're not out there. It does seem like it would be, with there being a lack of human presence, and as you mentioned, with all the rivers, streams, lakes, that kind of thing, it seemed like they would have everything they would need to stay undisturbed.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I forgot my question, but what do you? Oh, that's what I remember. Okay, so after you had your encounter, how did it change your life? What did you? Have you always been investigating these things since you were young, or are you just kind of like, oh yeah, they're out there, or what have you gotten into as far as investigating these things and trying to prove that what you saw was real, or just kind of just say, you know what, I saw what I saw, and that was it.
No, I've always been interested in it, but being interested in believing and then actually seeing something out there, it, I guess I can't prove 100% what I saw, but I'm 100% sure of what I saw, if that makes sense. And I just started watching documentaries more, started going to conferences, different, at Hocking Hills, there's the Bigfoot conference, the Sasquatch conference at Salt Fork State Park. There's different speakers that come to libraries. I just went to the Midwest Paranormal Conference down by Youngstown, Ohio, and there were some folks that are experts, so to speak, on Sasquatch, and that have had encounters and things like that. And there's a couple people that have a background in biology that were talking and explaining different things. And it's more than just a hobby. It's I don't want to say obsession, but it's kind of like let me put it this way: if I won the lottery and I could do anything I wanted full time, that's what I would do. I would go all over the place. I would be looking for Sasquatch and any number of other cryptids that very well could be out there. Because in my mind, I was, well, if Sasquatch is out there, why couldn't something else be out there? And if you look at the 20th century, with the early 21st century, like I believe it was in 2017 in South Asia, there was a species of orangutan that was discovered that we had no idea was there. The locals did, but no Western or European scientists had confirmed existence of that species. And now all of a sudden, there's another orangutan species in the mix, and it's always been there. We just couldn't prove it. And I don't see Sasquatch as anything different. You know what I mean? I think it's out there. I think they're more than likely more intelligent than a typical ape. Whether they're the missing link or they're some offshoot, we know from history at multiple times there were multiple species of humans. Maybe they didn't all die out or merge into one. I'm not really sure what the answer is, but I suspect at some point someone's going to find a biological sample and that'll confirm its existence. And then the question will be, well, what is it or where does it come from? I started my own website, cryptidparanormal.com. I reach out, I go to conferences, I try to reach out to people, Facebook groups. I'm always asking people, what did you experience? Tell me about it. What did you see? I always try to compare it to my own experience, that I see something that makes no sense, but other people I've talked to describe it the same way. It's massive. It's quick. It doesn't run, but it walks. It's quiet. It's not necessarily aggressive towards humans, but it's not necessarily interested in really mixing with us either. It just kind of observes and then leaves. And I've heard different people describe them as brown. Some people describe them as black. I've heard a little bit of gray. Some people say in between, which depending on where in the country, you know what I mean. There's different types of people throughout the world. I don't see why a Sasquatch or a Yeti would be any different, or any dozens other names. And then if you go back, and over the years I started researching just Native American history, or in Canada the first peoples, I think they call them the first people, or First Nations people. They all have stories of some kind of creature. Now a lot of them depict it as a more of a spiritual being than biological. My personal opinion, it's biological, but I truly have no idea. But it's interesting to me because cultures like that, at least from what I've read, paint or sculpt what they see. And if they're depicting these things, they're depicting stuff that they saw. You see a totem pole, there's a bear, an eagle, whatever else. And some of them have a Sasquatch, and I can't help but think, why is that? Why would they draw that on there? Why would they sculpt that if that's not something they would see? How would they even know what an ape looked like? Because supposedly there's no apes in North America. And at the time when these people were describing these stories and carving this, you're saying it's hundreds of years old. Okay, it's got to be one or the other. If it's hundreds of years old, how would they know what an ape looks like? To be that close, to make it where you look at it, you say, oh, that's probably like some kind of an ape. But if the people have never seen it, how could they possibly come to that conclusion without seeing it? I guess is kind of my personal opinion on it, because I just don't see how they could know, So yeah, I mean it's a constant thing. I spend a lot of spare time doing it. I go camping down to Salt Fork State Park. A lot of people have a lot of sightings there. It's massive.
So are you going to be, Brian, are you going to be at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference this year at Salt Fork coming up the first weekend of May?
Unfortunately not. I cannot make it this year.
Oh, okay. We will be there, but
Yeah, we'll be there.
it's too bad you couldn't make it out. We can meet in person, but yeah, there's a lot of weirdness going on in that area and that whole thing. But do you believe in any kind of the spiritual side or the paranormal, the woo side of Bigfoot or anything like that?
I don't know that I believe into the Bigfoot side of the paranormal. I do believe in the paranormal. I investigate that as well. I've encountered a couple strange things that I can't explain over the years. However, I'm not necessarily convinced that the paranormal is magic. I simply think it's science we just don't understand yet. And I was watching a documentary called Sasquatching on Tubi, and they interviewed the First Nations people in Canada, and they were talking about the Sasquatch traveling through portals. And I've heard different people say that more lately, and that's always kind of got me. If they are traveling through portals, it's something natural that they understand that we don't. I don't think they have some inherent power. I think they're biological. I think creatures they probably have smart enough, and they've probably evolved alongside us. And they're like many creatures, they probably just avoid us. If they were smart, we know gorillas are relatively smart, apes are relatively smart. If you take it one step further and a little bit smarter, they're probably smart enough to say, hey, their numbers are greater than ours. If they find out about it, they're going to kill us. It might just be a survival instinct that they have developed in. I'm not necessarily sure it's some supernatural method of disappearing. I think they're just very good at hiding, because from their perspective, we probably are a predator. Now, one-on-one, we wouldn't stand a chance, but they don't have the technology that we have, and they don't have the numbers that we have. Otherwise, we would know about them by now. So I think it's more of a survival instinct, how they disappear. I think they know how to blend in.
Well, I've said this before. I think they've seen what the white man has done to the Indian nation in this country, and I think that honestly, I think that the Indians and Bigfoot had some kind of correlation going on. They understood each other and got along a little bit and interacted. And then here comes the white man from Europe and starts shooting everybody with these bang sticks because they don't know, they don't have that, right? They don't have the technology that they did, and they just have bows and arrows. But yeah, and those creatures probably were like, you know what, we're just gonna go hide. We can't fight this, you know, and that's probably why they hate guns so much. I mean, if you have the if they are as smart as we think they are, you know, they communicate, they can probably pass that down that, you know, uh, guns are bad, and they know that they're bad. And you hear all the stories where Bigfoot and people encounter Bigfoot and Bigfoot see the gun and they're just, you know, pissed, or, you know, they freak out or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, I think it has something to do with it a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the native populations in North America lived in the environment. You know, the white man, as you say, when we came over from Europe, we changed the environment to fit us. You know, we destroyed their habitat essentially, and we, you know, retrofitted it to our needs. Where the original inhabitants here lived alongside the wilderness, and I think they probably, I agree, I think they probably lived and coexisted and respected each other's boundaries. I know in the Alaskan Triangle, up where Port Lock is, the native population there, there's still an area of the woods where they say they don't go because they call Bigfoot Hairy Man up there, but they claim that that is his territory. It always has been, and that's why they don't go there. And I think there's a, you know, on the western side, scientists doubt it because their history is oral. Just because their history is oral doesn't mean it's not right. The detail, the paintings, the carvings, their ancestors were seeing something up there. And, you know, there's still places in this country out west, Washington State, Montana, that are so thick and undiscovered. There could very well be something out there, or lots of something out there, and we would have no idea.
One thing that you had made a comment earlier that made me think about something, you know, and we were talking about the Indians and everything, and we have these we have our Indian reservations, right? We've pushed our Indians, the American Indian, into these reservations. And we've said, you know, you can live here, you have special rights and blah blah blah. But we've pretty much secluded these people to areas uh in that way, and that's wrong. You know, they should be able to leave freely where they want to, but we said, okay, well, here's a reservation. You can have your rights. That way, we're not totally wiping out this race, right? And you talk about people having encounters in these nature preserves, in these areas that are kind of secluded and whatnot. And maybe they did the same thing for Bigfoot. And you know, maybe they said, okay, maybe Americans, or I'm sorry, Europeans came over here and said, we're taking over this land. This is great. We're getting away from the country. But man, we got these Indians and there's crazy creatures. You know, maybe if we save some spots for them and keep them secluded. And a lot of them that we hear are near military bases, not the reservations, but these preserves where people are having encounters. You hear a lot about that around military bases. What is your thoughts on that, Brian?
I've heard that too, and I know some people think that perhaps they were genetically engineered or the government knows about them. If the government does know about them, it makes sense that they would be in reservations near military bases. Perhaps that's why those bases were put there to begin with. I've always kind of wondered how much they really know versus don't know, and how intelligent they are versus not. And you know, depending on how intelligent they are, maybe there's a reason they're by the military. Maybe they're keeping an eye on us. You know, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. That seems strange to me. I don't know. I don't think that they're genetically engineered, as some people have said. I've heard that a lot recently because they have been sighted all over the world before we had that technology. So I don't think that it's anything that has to do with us. Now, whether the government knows about them, whether they know about the military bases and there's a specific reason why they're there, that's hard to say. I have a suspicion that they have a pretty strong survival instinct. And so maybe instinctually they're drawn towards things that could be dangerous to them. And ultimately, if we blow ourselves up and destroy the environment, that kills them too. So they have a stake in it. Yeah, that's always an interesting theory. I always kind of wondered perhaps the military is just as curious as we are, and they're trying to communicate with them. Perhaps they found out a way to do so, and just it's not something that is going to be released for whatever reason. But it does seem like they are drawn to certain areas, and I've heard that about the dogman sightings too. That those are seen around military bases. But I don't know if that's I guess you have to put nature preserves somewhere. So is it a coincidence that there are a lot of them by military bases, or is there a purpose? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's definitely an interesting fact.
You just mentioned Dogman. I was going to ask you, do you guys have any sightings around that area that you're talking about there in Pennsylvania, Ohio, with Dogman?
There were some, I want to say it was Alliance, Ohio, I think, some years ago. I'm a little bit, and I know there's a lot of sightings in Michigan. And where we are in Cleveland, we're about 2 hours from Pennsylvania and 2 hours from Michigan. So you get a lot of people interested in both. I'm not sure. I believe that dogman is a different species. I just think it would be difficult for that two similar species of cryptid not to interact and not to be discovered, to be in this. You know what I mean? I kind of wonder if people are seeing it, and perhaps we're all seeing the same thing, we're just perceiving it differently. But yeah, there was at one point in Ohio. I want to say it was Alliance that there was dogman sightings, and I've read the articles and stuff on it. But as far as I know, that's the only real hotspot where a dogman in Ohio has ever been sighted. Mostly what we have is Sasquatch here.
So do you think the Bigfoot travel during the seasons? Do you think they stay in their area? I mean, how cold does it get where you guys are at? It's got to be pretty nasty and cold in the wintertime, right? Do you think these things
Yes, it does.
Do you think these things relocate south? Do you think there's cave systems where they hide? I mean, where do you think they go?
I think possibly both. I've considered the possibility that there's cave systems that we're simply unaware of that they are. I don't know whether it's again a part of their survival instinct, or perhaps that is simply where they live and they're cave dwellers, and there's systems of tunnels that we do have a lot of caves in Ohio, more than most. And to me, it makes perfectly sense that they would know about things that we would not, because there could very well be something in a state park that, since the land's never been developed and not necessarily every square inch has been explored, perhaps they cover up the entrances with something. They're stronger than we are. They're faster, and a lot of people who have sightings, they do seem to disappear. And I don't think there's a supernatural explanation. I suspect there probably is somewhere they're hiding, or some way they're hiding. And cave systems, I think, would be just as logical as anything else. I read an article recently where they talked about oceans under the earth, down hundreds of miles down, that they discovered through some kind of sonic radar. And I'm thinking to myself, well, there's cave systems that deep. And there was a few years ago in either China or Japan, there was a sinkhole. I don't know if you remember, it was on the news, and below the sinkhole was a forest. There were no animals. But it occurred to me, well, wait a minute, there's a sinkhole, and now all of a sudden there's this massive forest down there. Given there were no animals, it doesn't mean there couldn't be if that's not occurring somewhere else either. And if that does exist on a larger scale, that would explain, in my mind, where are they going? Well, they have some entrance or some way to get to some kind of cave system that can sustain them for as long as they need. And perhaps they're only coming out for food, whether it be, you know, vegetables or whether it be deer or whatever else they could potentially eat. I mean, I think as far as I know, apes, gorillas prefer meat if they can get their hands on it, but they'll eat anything to survive. If Sasquatch is falling into that nature, I mean, even there's no evidence that they've ever used weapons, but if it's that big, it could probably kill a deer pretty easily by itself. And you know, we would never know the difference. You know, how many times have you gone into the woods looking for Sasquatch and actually ever seen a dead deer? They do die, but how many times do you see them? You spend a lot of time in the woods, so their bodies disappear. I'm not saying Sasquatch is responsible for it. I'm just saying that's probably why we haven't seen a dead Sasquatch either. And we don't see dead deer anyway, so it's not like you're going to see signs, whether it be human or Sasquatch anyway. So the fact that they are capable of doing it, I would suspect that they are. And if there is a cave system, then they would have somewhere where they cook it. I couldn't tell you. I don't know what their digestive system was, but like a lot of animals, they might just pick it off the bone and eat what they eat and discard the rest.
Yeah, you got a good point. Whenever I'm out in the woods, I never see a dead carcass ever. I see them alongside the road all the time,
Sure. Yeah.
deer and everything else. But when I'm out in the woods, I never see or come across anything, a deer or anything for that matter. I don't think I ever have.
I haven't either. And 'cause people always ask me, they'll say, well, why, how come we haven't found a body? I'll just say, well, how many deer carcasses have you come across in the woods? And I'm not talking, you know, I'm talking on the highway, you see 5 or 10 a year, but how many in the woods? If you go hiking, say, once a week for a year, will you find a deer carcass? Probably not, because I do. I've never found one. Never seen a coyote carcass. See a couple birds here and there, maybe a squirrel. But, you know, I've never seen a large animal, dog, coyote.
Well, how often do people find, okay, here you go, a bear carcass, let alone a mountain lion or a cougar carcass? Nobody has ever come across, who has come across a mountain lion carcass?
Not me, that's for sure. I've never heard of anyone that really has.
I've never heard of anyone talk about
Me
it.
neither.
I mean, I'm gonna YouTube that and see if somebody has a video of that, but you know, you can't trust that anyway, right?
Mm-mm.
So many
Yeah.
but you just don't come across that stuff because these creatures,
Yeah,
they
and
go
we
and
talked
die in
about
a
this
cave somewhere, and then they're
how
eaten
many
up by the
times.
bugs and everything else.
If they're smart enough, if they're smart as we think they are, it says they don't bury their dead. You
I
know,
agree
we don't
completely.
know. Nobody knows.
No. I mean, if tree knocking is a legitimate form of communication for them, if they have any kind of language, even if it's just oral, not written, that probably means they have some kind of culture. So they probably have some way of treating their dead. And we know apes and gorillas, when they get sick and or die, will leave the group and go die off somewhere else, so that way they don't attract a predator. So if they're doing that, and the Sasquatch is some kind of a descendant of an ape or a gorilla, why would it not have the same instinct? But in the case of it being sentient more and having a language, so a culture, it may very well see us burying the dead and think, well, maybe even if it thinks, oh, maybe they do that to not draw predators, or maybe
Or
that's why they started doing.
maybe you're right. Maybe they are like elephants. You know, when they know
Yeah.
they're going to die, they just off they go. We don't know. We don't know.
Well, in that too, and if they don't want us to be discovered, and they're smart enough to have a language, a culture, and know that we're a threat by burying their dead, that keeps us off the trail. But again, there's no other animals out there too, and you know, they say the bones disintegrate in the soil, and if a body's out there for a couple of weeks, it gets picked clean. So even if they are dying out there, chances are we're not going to find it unless you're lucky enough to come up on it, you know, within a few days to really know what it is. But we don't even do that with deer, mountain lions, bear. So I don't think it's not having a body. I don't think is any indication it doesn't exist.
Well, here's what I'm going to say. When these creatures go out in the woods and they venture out, they're always in groups. And I think they always have an eye on each other. So if something would happen to one of them, I think they would know that. And I think they would grab the body and take care of it however they do that. Very seldom, I think, would every one of these creatures go roaming around by itself and get in any kind of trouble where it gets killed, unless it becomes, comes across a human that shoots it or gets hit by a semi or something like that. But I still think that they travel in groups for that reason. They're smart enough to do what they have to do to not be detected by humans, or we would have known about them a long time ago. And we do, the government does. They just don't want to share this for many reasons. But I mean, I don't think these things, I think that they do take care of themselves. I think they bury the bodies or they hide the bodies or they dispose of the bodies somehow, some way, so they know it will never be found. They have a language. We've heard this. So if they can talk to each other and have almost a universal language, because we've heard the samurai sounds in different locations, and I don't know what you think about that. But if that's the case, they obviously are going to do whatever it takes to when one passes away, like we would as humans, right? You just don't see okay, I'm not going to say you don't see a dead person laying out there somewhere in the street sometime, but for the most part, if a person passes away, they're taken care of. And I think they're on that level. I think that they run in groups, they have families, they watch each other. If something happens to one another, they do whatever it does to dispose of the body, whether that be bury it, eat it, who knows, burn it. I don't think they can start fire. And I think that's a lot of the reason why that you're not going to find a body. They do so much stuff to stay and recover, and that's the weird thing about these creatures. They do so much to not be detected by humans, but we still see them, and we know they're there. People know they're there. You know they're there because you saw one.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, in history, from the Native American and the first nations people, like many other formerly unknown species, the local populations say they're there, and modern, oh no, that can't be. We've never seen one. And then 50 years later, all of a sudden we find out, oh, it was there the whole time. They were right. They really did see that. We just didn't believe them because we didn't see it. And I don't. It makes sense to me. The natives had traditions of burying, or burning, whatever, however they would handle their dead. If they were communicating with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, which it seems like based on the cave paintings, drawings, totem poles, handed down oral history, that there was some kind of communication between them. Who's to say they didn't pick up on a Native American tradition of burying their body or doing a certain ceremony? Or perhaps that's where they learned it from. Maybe the Sasquatch had that all along, and that was a learned behavior from them. They coexisted in the environment. I agree. I think that they likely bury or at least they do something with their bodies. I don't think that it seems like they're creatures that are very careful and particular in what they do. And that to me is a sign of intelligence. The fact that they, for example, us shooting paintballs at a bear, it probably would have attacked us. That's what I would expect a bear to do. But for something to stop, that tells me it's intelligent enough to make a judgment call and decide that we're not a threat. And perhaps it just simply sensed fear. I can't say for certain. But if it sensed fear and it was an animal and it wanted lunch or dinner, then it would have probably came at us especially if it wasn't afraid of us and we were afraid of it. You know what I mean? If you look at how the animals behave when you show fear or you turn your back to a mountain lion, in about 30 seconds, it's going to be having you for lunch. But these things in multiple sightings, and it's not just what my friend and I saw, but when you talk to other people, it saw me, I saw them, or it threw rocks at me. It tried to get them to go away, but it didn't attack. It didn't hurt them. And if it's throwing rocks, so did it hit you with rocks? No, but it came close a lot of times. So it could have hit you. My thing is also, then you're saying it could have hit you with a rock. It chose not to. It simply wanted you to leave. So that to me is a sign of intelligence, and that ties right back around to their bodies. If they're intelligent enough to want to get rid of us, to want to push us away, to want to avoid us, I would have to assume that they have some kind of culture or practice of handling their dead, and that's why we don't find them.
Brian, tell us about your website, cryptidparanormal.com.
Yeah, so it's just a website. I have I outline my own encounter with Sasquatch, some of my opinions on cryptids. I have a blog I publish on there. I have an encounters page where I collect information from people, send it in, just different things they've seen, unedited. Whatever they send in is what I post. I just plow it out there. People, I don't like it edited. I want people to tell like their story in their own words, and then I'll pop it out there so other people can comment, believe, not believe. It's completely up to you. I research the paranormal side of things as well. Ghosts, spirits, possession, hauntings. I go all over the place. I'll spend the night in haunted places. I have all the good toys and stuff to try to track energy, temperature, things like that. There's a lot of mysteries out there. It all intrigues me. You know, I said before, I think that the paranormal is something that I don't think it's magic or mysticism. I think it's just something we can't explain yet. And to me, that's just a mystery word. I think it's all tied together. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of things out there that we don't understand. And we're so quick to question everything where our ancestors saw something and just simply accepted it for what it was. I think we may have lost something along the way. And, you know, that's pretty much what I do is I write my blogs on my experiences. I encourage other people to send in their experiences. You know what I mean? And then I just try to get it out there, what I've seen, and I hope people reach out with what they've seen. And even if they want to say they think I'm completely crazy and it's impossible what I saw, that's perfectly fine. I'm always interested in people's feedback because these mysteries can be solved if we all work together as a group. We can share information about the paranormal. We can share information about cryptids. You know, maybe it is all connected. Maybe it's all the same thing. Maybe the Sasquatches are aware of something going on just in the world in general that we are not. Maybe there is a reason they travel. I very much doubt they use portals, but I can't explain how they disappear. Maybe they do. You know, so I kind of search for answers, and that's my format. So I always encourage people, by all means, subscribe to the blog, send me a message. I want to hear about your story, or if you think I'm an idiot, you can tell me that too. I don't get offended. You know, everyone has I don't mind it being questioned because maybe they thought of something I haven't. You know what I mean? Sometimes people do. They'll say, well, what about, I don't know, I never thought about that. I really need to research that. I don't know what the answer is. And that's what the goal is to get information. We can't always think of everything, but you put it out there, people can question it, and then we can have a intelligent conversation about it and say, okay, we both have some good points. Now we need to go back to the drawing table and say, how does this stuff fit in? How does this information come together? Or does it come together? And then, you know, we go out and talk to each other like we are now and compare notes and hopefully get one step closer.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why we started this podcast. So, you know, we can hopefully, number one, give people a place to tell their stories, you know, safe, non-judgmental, and someplace where we can do some research.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just because you've never seen something, you know what I mean, doesn't mean it's not out there. I've never seen a tiger, but I know they exist. You know, so plenty of people have seen them. I've seen them, never have. You know, outside of a zoo or anything. But you know what I'm saying? So, not people. Well, I've never seen this, or there's no body, or there's not that much evidence. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means we have a lot of questions left to answer.
Yeah, and here's what I'm going to say: if the government came out tomorrow, all the governments in the world came out tomorrow and said, "Yeah, okay, here you go, guys. Bigfoot exists." Everybody in this world would believe it. I'm pretty sure they would. They'd be, "Oh, that's what we're being told. We're being told by high officials that these creatures exist." Let's just stay in the United States. If the president came out and said, we're just letting everybody know UFOs are real and so are Bigfoot. Do you think that there'd be anybody that doubted that fact?
There's always somebody that, no matter what you say, is going to doubt it. But I agree. I think the majority of the population would accept it as fact, regardless of what evidence they showed.
Just because one person or a government official or the government says this is what it is, right? But you have all these eyewitness accounts. Everyone we've talked to, everyone, all the other Bigfoot and cryptid podcasts have talked to. Thousands and thousands of encounters, right? I'm telling you, they're out there. And no one, there's 60% of the population doesn't want to believe, or 40%, or whatever it is. But as soon as the government comes out and says, yeah, they're real, or we're not denying that they're not real. It's like the UFO thing. People went from maybe 40% believing to 75% believing, but the government never really said, or the high officials, whoever you want to call them, never said, yeah, we're seeing them, they're real. But they have the proof, right? They're showing us stuff and they're not denying it.
For sure. Yeah.
So the propaganda itself is ridiculous. The propaganda about Bigfoot and the joke about Bigfoot and people going, oh, people believe in this crazy creature. But where did it come from? You know, people are seeing something out there, and it's not a bear walking on two legs.
No, it's not. And yeah, that's the other compelling fact is what is everyone seeing? How come the stories are so alike? There's books that go back in the 50s and 60s, but there was no internet back then. So no one was communicating. You couldn't hope like you can now. People were seeing something and have been ever since. Granted, technology makes it easier to fake and make things up, but it doesn't change the fact that people are still in record numbers out there seeing something. So something is in the woods, something is moving around. Why the governments of the world aren't interested in releasing that information is an excellent question. I wish I knew the answer. I don't think it's that they don't care. I would imagine there's a reason. I mean, if they're intelligent, that could very well be the reason right there. They don't want us to know there's another intelligent species on the planet. I don't know what they think would happen. They've avoided us this long, so chances are, even if we knew about them and went out looking for them in mass numbers, we probably wouldn't find them anyways. They've clearly gotten very good at hiding from us. But however, everyone is seeing the same thing. There's thousands of sightings all across North America. People who have never met, have nothing in common, see the same thing. So something is out there, whether you call it a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, a spirit, an alien, whatever it is, there is something out there.
Yeah, and it's crazy for people to believe that in aliens, things from other worlds, but they won't believe that there's a possible 8-foot, half human, half gorilla creature, or let's call it a gorilla creature, walking through the woods of North America and in the mountain ranges. It baffles me how people are and their thoughts about it. But Brian, anyway, we want to thank you so much for being on the show tonight, man. It was great talking to you and great hearing your experiences and talking about your website, cryptidparanormal.com. So hope you guys all check that out. And Brian, if you have any more experiences or encounters, man, please reach out to us and let us know what's going on, brother.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Stay in touch.
Let's keep in touch. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good, man. You have a good night. And again, thanks again, brother. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night. You too.
Take care.
Bye.